Good morning and welcome to today's deep dive.
You're running.
Today is April 3rd, 2026, and we are looking at a geopolitical landscape that is shifting faster than at any time in recent history. Right now, code and data harvested from the muddy, artillery-scarred trenches of Ukraine are instantly updating the multi-million-dollar defense systems of wealthy nations in the Middle East.
It really is a remarkable convergence. And, our goal today is to step back from the daily noise and present these events calmly and professionally. We are looking at the raw intelligence data to understand how military, hybrid, and diplomatic actions are intertwining across the globe.
Right. And to give you that clear, unbiased picture, today's deep dive is brought to you by our sponsor, ProWave AI. The insights we are unpacking today are generated by Stylo News, which is an incredible AI-powered news application.
Yeah, and what you need to know about Stylo News is that it is the consumer version of Stylo Intel Ops.
Which is a massive system.
Exactly. That is a heavy-duty software platform designed specifically for government, military, and enterprise operations.
So by tuning in today, you are essentially getting unique access to the exact kind of tool designed to support global decision makers.
Having that level of analysis is just essential right now. Over the past 2 weeks, the traditional boundaries of conflict have, well, they've completely blurred. We cannot look at what is happening in Europe, Russia, and Ukraine as an isolated regional dispute anymore.
No, absolutely not.
It is deeply connected to the sudden escalation in the Middle East, and it is fundamentally shifting global alliances.
So our mission today is to map that web for you. We're going to explore the title of today's intelligence brief, which is Ukraine Strikes Deep, Europe Mobilizes, Russia Signals Escalation.
Right.
And we have to start on the ground, looking at the sheer, staggering scale of the physical warfare, what the military calls the kinetic reality, because really everything else ripples out from there.
It does. The baseline of this conflict is currently defined by intense attritional warfare. So to understand the broader geopolitical maneuvers, we first have to look at the raw data from the front lines over the last few days of March.
Okay, let's unpack this. Let's look at March 29th. Russia launched a massive saturation strike against Ukraine. We are talking about approximately 442 drones.
Right.
Alongside at least one Kinzhal hypersonic missile, all in a single night. Now, for you listening, a saturation strike isn't just about hitting targets. It is a mathematical strategy.
It is entirely mathematical.
Imagine a bouncer at a club trying to stop 400 people rushing the door all at the exact same second.
Yeah.
The goal is to completely overwhelm the radar tracking systems and force Ukraine to fire million-dollar interceptor missiles to shoot down $20,000 drones.
Which financially exhausts their air defenses over time.
Exactly.
And beneath that cold mathematical strategy is a very grim human reality. The International Committee of the Red Cross is reporting that they are currently facilitating the exchange of around 1,000 bodies a month between the two sides.
Wow. 1,000 a month.
Yes. That single metric alone illustrates the brutal, almost World War I-style reality of the current front line.
Yet, despite that immense pressure, Ukraine is not just holding the line. They are actively changing the geometry of the battlefield. Recently, Ukrainian forces thwarted a major Russian ground offensive. They reportedly destroyed 2 entire Russian brigades in just 3 days.
That is a massive operational failure for the attacking forces.
But the more significant shift is that they are reaching far beyond those front lines.
Right.
They are launching strategic drone strikes deep inside Russian territory.
We have seen them hit the Smolensk aviation plant, but more critically, they have targeted key Baltic oil export hubs, specifically the Ust-Luga and Primorsk ports.
Right.
This is a deliberate economic strategy. By severely reducing Russia's operational capacity to export oil, Ukraine is aiming to directly disrupt the financing of the Russian war effort.
Which, by the way, has a direct impact on global energy markets.
Yeah.
Potentially the gas prices you see at your local station.
Exactly. Everything is connected.
And while this is happening, there is a shadow war going on internally. The Ukrainian Security Service, the SBU, recently dismantled a Russian GRU assassination network.
That was a highly sophisticated cell.
Yeah, they were actively targeting prominent public figures in Ukraine, and the takedown actually resulted in the death of an armed assassin.
Now, as the physical threats evolve, the technology required to counter them is accelerating at an unprecedented pace. Ukraine and NATO have just launched a €10 million competition called the Unite Brave NATO initiative.
10 million euros.
Right, and the goal is to rapidly develop next-generation counter-drone technology.
Wait, I want to pause on something here.
Right.
Because Ukraine is now sharing unprecedented real-time battlefield AI data with its Western allies.
Yes, to accelerate the development of autonomous drone systems.
Right, so I am trying to reconcile these two pictures. If Russia is launching nearly 500 drones a night, and Ukraine is successfully hitting oil ports deep inside Russia with their own unmanned systems,
Hmm.
are we seeing a total shift away from that muddy trench warfare into a purely remote, attritional tech war?
It is a vital question, but it isn't an either-or scenario. It is a synthesis. The trench warfare remains brutally physical, as those Red Cross body exchange numbers prove.
Right, right.
But what you are identifying is exactly why this data sharing matters so much. The Ukrainian battlefield has effectively become a real-time, high-stakes testing ground for autonomous warfare.
So they're gathering data on everything.
Millions of drone flights, radar pings, and sensor readings. It is now a vital strategic asset for the entire Western alliance.
Because it allows defense systems to learn and adapt at the speed of software updates, rather than the years it takes for traditional military procurement.
Precisely. And because Russia is seeing its conventional military forces severely degraded and tied down in those Ukrainian trenches, Moscow is forced to rely heavily on psychological and hybrid pressure elsewhere.
Ah.
Which brings us to the rapidly expanding hybrid battlefield across Europe. Russia's strategy is absolutely not confined to its immediate borders.
No, the indicators are lighting up across the board, particularly on NATO's northern flank. Just recently, 2 unidentified drones crashed in southeastern Finland.
Which immediately highlights the vulnerabilities in Nordic airspace. Right. On top of that, there is widespread GPS jamming occurring across the Baltic Sea. And for you listening, this isn't just a military headache. GPS jamming means commercial airliners are having to reroute.
Civilian shipping logistics are being disrupted.
Yeah, it impacts everyday supply chains.
We are also seeing reports of Russian separatist propaganda, specifically targeting areas like Narva and Estonia and Spitsbergen.
Wow.
And these are not isolated anomalies or accidents. They are deliberate probes designed to test response times and political resolve.
And it extends into traditional espionage, too. Russia has quietly but significantly expanded its intelligence hub in Vienna, Austria,
Yes, they are exploiting Austria's historical neutrality there.
to host an estimated 500 diplomats, many of whom are actively tasked with monitoring NATO communications.
It is also escalating into direct sabotage. Germany is currently facing a massive surge in Russian hybrid warfare. This includes physical sabotage of infrastructure and sophisticated AI-driven disinformation campaigns.
It's gotten so bad that Germany is officially establishing a new joint center, specifically to counter these hybrid operations.
Which leads us to a massive psychological operation that just made headlines. What's fascinating here is how German media recently revealed a highly detailed map, the Build map,
Right, the build map.
outlining potential Russian invasion routes into Estonia, Latvia, and Lithuania.
And this revelation immediately prompted the Baltic states to rapidly ramp up their military readiness, including mobilizing citizen volunteer forces.
Exactly.
It's like an intruder testing all the windows and doors of your house without actually breaking the glass, just making sure you hear them.
That is a perfect analogy.
But here's where it gets really interesting, and we have to ask, is this build map a genuine leak of a concrete invasion plan? Or is it part of the psychological warfare meant to fracture NATO cohesion?
The answer lies in understanding Russian military doctrine, where ambiguity itself is a primary weapon. The concept is known as gray zone coercion.
Gray zone coercion.
Think of it like a neighbor who plays their music just loud enough to drive you crazy and disrupt your life, but not quite loud enough for the police to arrest them. The immediate goal isn't necessarily a conventional armored thrust into the Baltics tomorrow.
So the goal is to stretch NATO's resources and test the political resolve of European capitals.
Exactly. By leaking invasion plans, jamming civilian GPS, and flying drones into Finland, Moscow creates a permanent baseline of anxiety.
Right.
It forces Europe to spend billions of euros and immense political capital on constant defense readiness, hoping to induce exhaustion and eventual appeasement.
And that fatigue is exactly what adversaries rely on, especially when the crisis suddenly expands globally. The pressure we are seeing on Europe is now directly connected to the sudden explosion of conflict in the Middle East.
Yes.
For everyone listening, it is crucial to see how these seemingly separate regional wars are heavily impacting each other.
The geopolitical center of gravity shifted significantly in late February and March following coordinated U.S. and Israeli strikes on Iranian military and nuclear infrastructure.
And the fallout from that has been severe and immediate. Iran has retaliated with direct threats to close the Strait of Hormuz and target Gulf energy facilities.
Which is a massive choke point.
Yeah, to put that in perspective, about 20% of the world's total global oil consumption passes through that strait. Threatening it has already caused global oil prices to spike, which hits consumers directly through inflation.
It certainly does.
Now, amid all of this chaos, Ukraine has made a highly surprising pivot. They have officially sent 201 military experts to the United Arab Emirates, Qatar, Saudi Arabia, and Kuwait.
Which caught a lot of analysts off guard.
Right. Their stated mission is to help these Gulf states defend against Iranian Shahed drones. Furthermore, Ukraine just signed a comprehensive 10-year defense cooperation agreement with Qatar.
Yes.
Wait, I am really stuck on this. If Ukraine is fighting for its very survival at home, dealing with massive ammunition shortages, and relying so heavily on international aid, how and why are they exporting over 200 of their top military experts to the Gulf?
It does seem counterintuitive at first glance.
It seems like a terrible idea on paper.
But it is actually a brilliant strategic maneuver. Ukraine is leveraging its unique, hard-won combat expertise. They have more experience intercepting Iranian-designed Shahed drones than any other nation on Earth.
Okay, that makes sense.
They understand the specific acoustic signatures of these drones, what they sound like on a microphone network before a radar even detects them. They know exactly how to rewrite interception software to counter their flight paths.
So they are essentially trading that highly specialized knowledge for geopolitical influence.
Yes. By sharing this expertise, Ukraine is transitioning from being solely a consumer of global security to becoming a producer of security.
Oh, wow, a producer of security.
This transition secures deep relationships with wealthy Middle Eastern allies, diversifies their diplomatic and financial support base away from relying solely on the West, and actively counters the growing Russia-Iran military alliance on a global scale.
That is a fascinating paradigm shift. And speaking of alliances, the anti-Western authoritarian bloc is consolidating rapidly in response.
We are seeing that very clearly.
We just saw Belarus President Alexander Lukashenko visit North Korea to sign a formal friendship pact. Concurrently, Kim Jong-un has officially declared North Korea's nuclear status to be irreversible.
And he explicitly named South Korea as their most hostile enemy.
Right. And the trade networks within this bloc are highly active and bypassing traditional sanctions. Russia is procuring massive amounts of weapons and artillery ammunition from both North Korea and Iran to sustain its war effort in Ukraine.
And looking toward the Balkans, Serbia has just finalized the purchase of Chinese ballistic missiles.
So fighting this interconnected global web clearly requires incredibly unified Western alliances. And that leads us directly into the current diplomatic fractures we are seeing within the U.S. and Europe.
Yes, it does.
Now, looking at the transatlantic alliance, we are about to touch on some highly polarized domestic politics here in the U.S. and in Europe. And just to be absolutely clear to you listening, our goal today isn't to take a political side, to generate fear, or to endorse any specific viewpoint.
Absolutely not. We are going to impartially report the stated policies and the raw intelligence data from these sources to give you the complete factual picture of what decision makers are actually facing.
Exactly. We are just conveying the intelligence gathered.
Right. And the undeniable reality of early 2026 is that the transatlantic alliance is operating under immense stress.
The U.S. administration, under President Trump, is currently prioritizing the Middle East conflict over the European theater. The administration is heavily pressuring NATO allies to assist in the military effort to reopen and secure the Strait of Hormuz, essentially linking alliance solidarity to European cooperation in the Gulf.
That is a major diplomatic push.
Furthermore, regarding Ukraine, the U.S. has signaled a major policy condition. They have indicated they will only provide long-term security guarantees to Ukraine if Ukraine makes territorial concessions, specifically by withdrawing its forces from the Donbas region.
And this significant U.S. policy shift is happening at the exact moment Europe itself is experiencing deep internal divisions. The fundamental motivation for joining the European Union is shifting before our eyes. Historically, nations sought EU membership primarily for economic prosperity and open trade.
Yeah?
Today, nations like Iceland and Norway are reconsidering EU membership almost entirely for collective defense and security reasons.
But the EU is deeply fractured on how to actually provide that security. And you can see it in the stark political contrasts between member states. Look at Denmark.
All right, Denmark is a prime example.
They are heading into elections featuring a government that has taken a strongly pro-Ukraine, anti-Russia stance, committing heavy resources to Kyiv.
While on the exact opposite end of the spectrum, you have Hungary, Prime Minister Viktor Orban has halted gas supplies to Ukraine. He has publicly blamed the West for provoking the war, and he has explicitly refused to call Vladimir Putin an aggressor.
And underlying all of this political maneuvering is a harsh logistical reality. A recent intelligence report by the Royal United Services Institute, or RUSI, highlighted a critical vulnerability. The simultaneous wars in Ukraine and Iran have exposed massive Western ammunition shortages.
Because you cannot just 3D print heavy artillery shells overnight.
Exactly. Scaling up that industrial base takes years of investment and secure supply chains.
Yeah.
So what does this all mean? If the U.S. shifts its primary focus to the Middle East and makes its support in Europe highly conditional, does Europe actually have the ammunition, the industrial base, and the political unity to stand alone against Russian pressure?
That is the defining question for the survival of collective security in this decade. NATO and the EU rely entirely on consensus.
Right.
When you have differing national interests, like the stark divide between Hungary's alignment with Russian energy interests and Denmark's firm support for Kiev, that consensus breaks down.
It fractures.
In 2026, collective security is incredibly fragile. Europe is being forced to realize that without guaranteed American logistical supply lines and the U.S. nuclear umbrella, their fragmented political landscape makes them highly vulnerable.
Vulnerable to the exact kind of gray zone, coercion, and hybrid warfare Russia is currently deploying.
Precisely. It is a sobering, complex intelligence picture.
It really is. Today, we have covered an incredible scope of global events. We started with the sheer mathematics of drone swarms and the grim reality of trench warfare in Ukraine.
Then we tracked how that physical war spawned a shadow war of espionage in Vienna and hybrid sabotage in Germany.
Right, and we connected the strain on European defense to the exploding Middle East oil crisis, the threat to the Strait of Hormuz, and the brilliant tactical deployment of Ukrainian drone experts to the Gulf.
And finally, we looked at the shifting, conditional nature of U.S. diplomacy and the deep political and industrial fractures dividing Europe.
It is a deeply interconnected web.
Yeah.
And, the patterns and probabilities change daily based on hundreds of different variables.
Which is exactly why you need the right tools to stay well-informed without feeling totally overwhelmed by the noise.
Absolutely. If you want to stay on top of these fast-moving global events, you need to check out the Stylo News app. It is available as both a mobile and computer application, and it tracks global intelligence instantly.
We mentioned it is the consumer version of Stylo Intel Ops.
Right.
And it features an incredible OSINT, or open-source intelligence engine. What that means is the AI automatically scrapes public data, satellite imagery, and news reports, and instantly translates data from over 20 languages so you can read it in plain English.
That is amazing.
Ah.
And one of its most powerful features for everyday users is the Location AI bot. With a single click, it runs what intelligence agencies call pattern of life analysis.
Which is basically how your phone knows you go to the gym at 6 a.m. on Tuesdays, but applied to global military and political movements.
Exactly. It looks at historical habits and forecasts future timelines based on the latest global events. It is literally like having a team of dedicated intelligence analysts right in your pocket.
It filters out the bias and presents the different courses of action and perspectives clearly so you can identify where there are broad common viewpoints and what events are most likely to happen next.
So we highly encourage you to subscribe to Stylo News. You can customize your own personal intelligence-style briefs, drawing from hundreds of traditional news sources and X. Go to www.stylonews.com to start tracking global intelligence like a decision maker today.
It is an invaluable resource.
We want to thank you so much for taking the time to join us for this deep dive. We always want to hear from you, so please reach out and request topics for future deep dives, and be sure to follow Stylo News on your favorite social media platforms.
And I will leave you with a final thought to ponder as you go about your day. If artificial intelligence and acoustic drone data harvested from the muddy battlefields of Ukraine are now instantly shaping the multi-million-dollar defense systems of wealthy nations in the Middle East and Europe, are we currently watching the rapid beta testing of the next century's autonomous global warfare?
That is a profound thought.
We are moving rapidly toward a future where the code running a defense system and the data feeding it become far more valuable than physical territory itself.